Hello, Dreamer. I'm Brittany. Today I wanted to sit down and have a little chat with you about many people's long-term dream of snowbirding. That was always a dream of mine growing up. I always wished that I could escape the cold. I grew up in the really cold winters up in Illinois, and all I wanted to do was go someplace warm for the winter. And now I do. If you have been watching this channel for a while, you know that I have a property here in Orlando, Florida, and I also have a home in Illinois. And me and my husband go back and forth between them as we will and as the kind of weather dictates. This was always something that I wanted to do, and we continually get a lot of questions about it, and I don't actually talk a whole lot about it. So I thought I would sit down today and answer a lot of the more common questions that we get about snowbirding. So hopefully you find this helpful. Hit the like and subscribe button if you do, and let's dive right in. So the first category I thought we would dive into is cost. That's definitely the number one question that we get is like, how do you afford it? How do you kind of manage the cost of two households? And the number one answer that I have for that is short-term rentals, Airbnb, Vrbo, pretty well all of the above we've used and tried. Is definitely not an ad for any of them, but that's just simply how we've managed to afford it. Here in Florida, we rent out part of our home, and up in Illinois, we actually stay in a short-term rental that we pretty well use as a short-term rental full-time there, and we just live in it whenever we go up there. So that's kind of how we manage the cost. Otherwise, it would be incredibly expensive and probably something that we would need to have at least one or both of the properties completely paid off to sustain. I can go into a separate video on the breakdown costs, because I could easily talk to 20-30 minutes on just the actual cost section of like managing the finances of multiple properties in multiple states, but that's the general overarching answer to it. Now, in the past, to manage costs, whenever we were very first dipping our toe into whether or not we actually wanted to be snowbirds, is rentals. Us renting, not owning. So we would come down for 2, 3, 4 months in the winter. We book almost a year ahead to get a solid, good monthly rate. And we would just come down and rent a short-term rental out. And that's why Orlando was really good for that, because there's a lot of affordable, or at least there were back in the day, 5-7 years ago, there was some decently affordable short-term rentals down in the Disney area. So that could be a good solution. If you're thinking about doing it, I always recommend, if you can, test it out for a little bit less money than actually jumping in the lake head first. Then that's what I would do, kind of test the waters. Also, something that you should think about in the cost category is the idea of using huge spans of time to your advantage. So I definitely think of terms of like months whenever I want to be somewhere. This is because it's just cheaper overall. Traveling expenses are going to be cheaper because you're not going back and forth as often, and you can then rent something or have it open if you are renting it yourself for longer periods of time between, making it easier to fill vacancy and therefore kind of equalizing the cost a bit. If you're just back and forth all the time, then your rental calendar or your rental cost is just going to be a little bit more chaotic and much harder to budget long term. One of the costs that people continually overlook, and I honestly overlooked whenever we first started snowbirding, and it's taken us 7 years to get this even remotely under control, and that is the cost of products. food products, beauty products, household products, if you're going to buy or even long-term rent another property in another state, then you're going to need doubles of everything. And that can be so expensive. And it's taken about 7 years, I would say a solid 5 years, for us to accumulate a double household worth of things. I definitely would suggest getting used things, at least to start out, to kind of manage that cost if you're trying to establish yourself in a new area. I mean, after all, you're only going to be there part of the time anyway. The other product cost that I mentioned is food. And I'm still getting better about this, even though I have gotten a lot better than when we first started. And that was kind of managing like how much food we threw away whenever we were going back and forth. So that last week before we go up to Illinois or we come back down to Florida, I'm really scraping the bottom of the freezer and the pantry, and I'm really trying to use up all of those last products. Being in a normal household, this is something you probably would never do. You're generally, hopefully, not going to be like running out of food completely, but I found it the very best to just leave your house pretty bare. Up in Illinois this past year, we lost power for 3 days, and so we got back and we had to throw away anything that we had saved in the freezer. It all went bad. So it's never good to leave products there because you might not even know that the power went out or something happened to different products while you were gone. It's really not good for things to sit. And so for that reason alone, you might need to manage the products that you buy a little bit more carefully, especially my beauty products. Whenever I come down to Florida or I go up to Illinois, I use different products in like different locations, and sometimes it's hard for me to remember what I have up there and what I might need to pack. But we have found it best and most convenient to just have doubles of everything. We go back and forth enough every 2-3 months or so that products, beauty products particularly, stay okay. So it just makes sense for us to have doubles, but you might just want to pack all of your beauty, personal hygiene supplies and just take them with you and only have one set of those. Just something to kind of think about either way. The next category that I wanted to dive into is general social life. So this came as a huge shock to me, but it's actually hard to manage relationships remotely. I know. I'm sure I say it and you're like, duh, Brittany, of course it is. But as, you know, somebody who had grown up in like a small community and all of her friends had pretty well stayed local, this was quite a shock to me, where I would leave town for a month or two and they would continue living their lives while I was away. And then I was trying to like inject myself back into their lives and reconnect with them whenever I came back. It has been a slow learning curve to learn how to maintain those relationships while I'm not near people. I definitely am one of those people that I don't really like to text and pick up the phone to like talk with people. I would much rather like go out, let's have a drink, let's go out to dinner, let's go bowling, whatever, really. But I would prefer to be physically with you if I'm trying to be a friend or be in a relationship with you of really any sort. So that was definitely like a learning curve for me. Also, as somebody who desperately suffers from FOMO so bad, the amount of events and parties and various other life happenings that are going to happen, you're simply just going to be out of town, you're not going to be able to attend. It would just be chaotic for you to attend. You would be doing that back and forth that I mentioned in section 1, but it's just not feasible to be at every event. And there might be an event happening a couple months later that you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to go to that. There's always beautiful plays and musical events going on here in Orlando. And I am constantly looking at my calendar and being like, no, I think I'm going to be out of town for that. And it's like, dang, I would love to go to that. It's just not going to happen. So feeling involved in the community and going to all those events is definitely a luxury that you don't realize until you move away. And then you have to kind of pick and choose what events that you go to. So just something to put in perspective and be aware of moving forward if you're considering snowbirding. So the next section is a little bit more dull than the first couple, and that is just government normal issues that you deal with, mail in particular. I have found it useful to have a permanent address somewhere, whether that be Illinois or Florida, and just to hold that permanent address. Some people I know switch their permanent address to wherever they currently are. That's fine, but our number one problem that we've encountered with that is mail. The mail forwarding service can be hit or miss, really on its best day. And we've missed notices before, we've missed bills before, and we've just found it not worth it. And a super good idea that you just have your mail held, or if possible, gathered up in bulk and then sent to you at your location that you're at. P.O. boxes are great for that. There's also separate business services like mail services that'll do that for you. All decent, good options in my personal opinion, and super, super useful and worth paying for if you need to. This next section is about habits. Now, this can be a good or bad thing depending on how you think of it. So, people establish habits based on the systems that they have in place. Now, those systems are affected by all of the different circumstances that you live your life in. For example, you might brush your hair first before brushing your teeth just because of where your hairbrush is in relation to your toothbrush. Just a really rough example. Whenever you go to a new location, be that a different house in a different state, then that's going to throw off your systems. And so you're going to do things differently in different locations and in different homes. Our home here is set up very, very different than our home in Illinois is. Also here, we can spend almost every gorgeous minute outside. I mean, it's beautiful today. Full sunshine, perfection, wonderful. While in Illinois, I think it's raining today. It's probably around 40 degrees and miserable. You don't really want to go outside. So here, I even walk the dog 4 or 5 times just to go on a little stroll out in the beautiful weather. Where in Illinois, I'm walking her maybe 3 times because I don't really want to go down the stairs out into the cold and kind of brave the wind and rain a lot of the time. There's just different habits that you're going to establish in different locations, and trying to fit both locations into the same box is going to make you continually struggle. So what I think of it is like a fresh start. Every time you go to a different property, it's your chance to reinvent yourself, if you will, and possibly start a new, better habit or try something new. That in itself will give you such an endorphin high because it's new. And so you're going to be able to experience all of that newness every time you go back and forth, and you're starting new habits and you're trying new things out. So that's really a great thing, except if you have a really lovely life in one location and you're just really happy with the way you get up of a morning and your breakfast that you have and the way you work out and the way you go about your day, then you're going to have to be very, very careful whenever you're going back and forth that you can maintain those habits and you set up the right systems for that. But if you're thinking about snowbirding, then you're probably not happy. Sometime in the year, I would say it's fairly likely that your habits are getting disrupted by the weather wherever you are. And so it's probably going to be a good thing that you're moving somewhere new during some months and going to be able to have that new system of habits. But just be aware that they will change just because you're in a new environment. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The next category, if you can call it that, because this will probably be fairly brief, but one of the things I really want to talk about and one of the huge upsides of being a snowbird is the travel. Now, you might be thinking, okay, you're traveling back and forth between locations, and that's not so fun. It definitely takes time out, potentially a day, half a day, depending on how far you're going, to travel and adjust to a new location. However, the positive side of that is that you are kind of unlocking another area. So if you're moving from the northern US to the south for the winter, then that's going to open up cheaper flights to the Caribbean. You're going to be able to explore more locations in like Mexico and South America, where whenever you were in possibly like New England, you are possibly really familiar with Canada, maybe even like Greenland, Iceland, Europe possibly, but you haven't really explored a lot of the south that's kind of been like below you because it's just farther away and it's harder to get to. So whenever you establish yourself in a new location, it definitely opens your world to being able to explore even more of that area around you. Like, it's been amazing moving to Florida and finding all these amazing small Florida towns to explore. There's so many small Florida towns that have so much personality that I never knew of, and I probably would never have known of if I hadn't moved here. So that's a huge plus and something I really hadn't counted on whenever I moved here, and I'm really excited to continue to enjoy in the future. So the last thing I wanted to talk about before we kind of summarize everything is pets. And I would go into children, but I don't have any, so I don't really have anything to bestow on you knowledge-wise with that. I mean, I'm sure you already have given that plenty of thought as to how snowboarding would affect your children if you had them. But I do and can want to talk about pets. Now, I've had a couple of Yorkies while I've been a snowbird, and Yorkies are particularly well adapting dogs, and obviously she's pretty compact. She's pretty tiny. And so I can really take her anywhere, and I really worked on this Yorkie being much more open to new experiences and not being so afraid of the world as my previous Yorkie was. And that has made a huge difference with the adjustment. But whenever you're factoring costs, definitely factor in that you're going to have to either pay to fly your dog down, or you're going to drive down every single time that you're like snowbirding, and also how your dog is going to adapt to a new environment. I will say that I haven't noticed any negative effects with my dog Luna snowbirding down to Florida. She seems to be happy to be wherever I am and adjust to her new home, wherever that be, perfectly fine. And she seems actually pretty happy whenever we get down here and she gets more walks outside. So that's something. If I'm happy, then she's happy, I'm pretty sure. She also has play dates and vets in multiple locations. So she's well taken care of no matter where we're at. And honestly, I could probably talk about this all day. I mean, there's so many more categories and things that we could talk about. So if you have questions, definitely leave them down in the comments. I would be happy to answer them or make another video diving deeper into any of these topics. I just wanted to give you guys kind of a brief overview of like how we think about the snowbirding and all of the benefits and pitfalls that we have encountered over the last 7-8 years that we have been snowbirds. I would say overall, I love it. There, of course, are things that are challenging about it at times, but I wouldn't change it, and I don't think we're planning on changing it anytime soon. I really love the falls up in southern Illinois. They're beautiful, and the spring is really great too. So being able to enjoy more seasons out of the year instead of just raging hot or weirdly rainy and kind of chilly here in Florida. Florida's two climates or seasons. And you might get both of those in one day. If you know, then you know. But I really, really have enjoyed it. And it's been something that we have kind of worked towards for a while. And I would recommend snowbirding if you struggle, especially with seasonal depression. I struggled with seasonal depression for so many years. Whenever I was younger, I really enjoy having the sunshine almost every single day. And it has made a huge, huge impression on my mood and overall well-being. So something to think about. You can't necessarily put a price on health. So let me answer any of your questions below, and I'll be back shortly with another video. Until next time, dreamer, bye.